Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I am discussing cliffhangers. They are, of course, used a lot in television in particular, where an episode ends on a cliffhanger, or more often than not, a season ends on a cliffhanger. And the whole point is to get the audience to want to tune into the following episode or the following season. So, of course, the absolute worst is when a TV show is canceled on a big cliffhanger, like a big season cliffhanger. I know one for me that comes to mind is The Last Man on Earth. Ugh, just thinking about that, man, that just sucks. I know there were plenty of shows over the years where they were canceled on a huge cliffhanger, and that's the worst. But then, it's like you're left to your own devices, leave it open to imagination, your own interpretation, because that is the fun about cliffhangers, creating a buzz and allowing audiences to speculate what's going to happen next. Because really, of course, a cliffhanger is just a dramatic moment or high tension moment that leaves the audience in suspense and leaves you guessing, leaves you wondering what's going to happen next. And it could be whether the character is in danger, or if someone new shows up, or just some kind of new twist, or what is the decision the character is going to make. So there are also mini cliffhangers, honestly, within an episode of television, specifically in network TV, where you have three acts, and then it's act one, commercial break, act two, commercial break, act three. So before each commercial break, sometimes there are just small cliffhangers where a new character shows up, or just a question, like something just kind of to throw off the characters or whatever, and just kind of leave you guessing a little bit, and just like that mini cliffhanger, and then you got the ad break, and then waiting to see what's going to happen next. So cliffhangers really are a valuable tool, and the whole point really is to engage with the audience. So it really is more so about the audience. And sometimes really there's cliffhangers where we know something that the character doesn't, or vice versa. So it just is really an interesting story element to play around with. And of course, really, it's used in any serialized form of storytelling, including book series as well, of course, since again, the whole point is to get the reader to want to purchase and read the next book. So, this article is called 10 Cliffhangers That Make Readers Turn the Page by Amanda Patterson. So, she focuses specifically on fiction, but again, this can be used in any form of serialized storytelling. So, first, she gives a little backstory about the history of cliffhangers, and the article says, one of the most famous examples of using cliffhangers can be found in 1001 Nights, in which the woman tells a series of stories to the king for 1001 nights, ending each on a cliffhanger to save herself from execution. They were also an important element of Victorian serial novels, including those by Charles Dickens, a pioneer of the serial publication of narrative fiction. Television series are notorious for ending seasons on major cliffhangers. The most famous example was the Who Shot J.R. Ewing ending in Dallas. So, again, really, the best cliffhangers are the ones where you can speculate as much as you want, but then it still takes the story in a different direction that you weren't even expecting. So, like, predictable cliffhangers. I mean, sometimes, honestly, though, it's like satisfying when you predict, like, oh, yeah, I knew it. I knew it was this person who did it, or just whatever it may be. Or, oh, I knew, like, just whatever you kind of predicted that the person's true motivation, whatever it is. So that can be a fun thing, too. But then still, like, trying to keep the audience on their toes. That's just still what makes it a lot of fun. So now she goes into the 10 cliffhangers that make readers turn the page. So, number one. An unanswered question. This is the most common cliffhanger. Ask a provocative question or make sure that the one that started the scene is still unanswered. So again, as I just said about mini cliffhangers, they are also used in comic book writing too, where if a character is in danger in particular, and then you have it say at the bottom panel, then like when you literally turn the page, then you see what their fate is. Is someone going to save them? Are they going to fall? So even small things like that. And just allowing moments to breathe, where if a character asks a question in particular, then not even answering right away, or maybe they give a different, purposely throwing them off, and then if we perhaps know the true answer, so things like that. Again, I just play around with what the audience knows versus what the characters knows. The dramatic irony, of course. Number two is a loss. The loss can be physical or emotional. It can be a tangible thing or a relationship, but try to make it something that the protagonist thinks he or she can't do without. And really, emotional stuff just always plays well, especially, I mean, in anything, in movies too, like when if there's multiple, if we're following a main character though, but then if there are other plots going on, and then if they think they're going to lose someone, and then like where, if of course they're invested, then we as the audience are invested. So, I mean, to me, emotional stuff is always what's more impactful, but physical too. I mean, like life or death situations too. That's obviously the highest stakes there are, life and death situations in movies and in TV shows too. So, number 3, dangle a carrot. Show the character, protagonist or antagonist, that something he or she wants is that he or she desperately wants is there, but out of reach. That's the worst, when you're following along with the character, especially in a series, and you know that they've been striving for something, and it's as if they're so close, but then it's just out of reach. You know, one that comes to mind as I'm saying this now is Schitt's Creek, the season 1 finale, when you think they're going to get out of Schitt's Creek, of course, and then it turns out the guy ends up having a heart attack. Like, the guy that's going to buy the town is like, he has a heart attack, so then he's in a coma. That sounds dark as I'm saying it, but you know, it's a very light, wonderful show. You know, it show's amazing. Oh man, go watch it. It's on Netflix. So it's a whole resurgence, like a whole new wave of fans because they won 9 Emmy Awards. Anyway, so when they think they're going to get out of Schitt's Creek, and then it's like, well, they're still stuck there. And of course, you know, it's not going to be that easy because then that would end the series. So, but that's just a good example of, it's like, oh, they want to get out, but nope, they're still stuck there. So when a character though is striving for a goal and like they're working towards it, but then it's just still out of reach, they still can't get it. Oh man. Anyway, number 4, a glimmer of hope. A pronouncement is made that something that is needed, new, different, or exciting will happen soon. So that's like more of a, like an exciting moment where someone shows up. It's like, oh, you know, like a new whoever, like someone they hadn't seen in a long time, or you just something that, as they say, 2 types of stories. Someone comes to town or someone goes on an adventure. So you can always break these things down. Oh, there's 2 types of stories. Oh, there's, you know, like all this broad way of talking about storytelling and screenwriting in particular. So that is a glimmer of hope. Number 5 is a physical threat. Put the character or somebody that he or she loves, and then in parentheses she put love interest, in immediate danger. If you have created empathy between your readers and your character, they have to carry on reading. So of course, like if your protagonist, they're invested in whomever it is, then we as the reader or the audience, we're invested in that relationship or whatever it may be. Like, of course, you know, if their loved one, whether it's someone like their boyfriend or girlfriend, or whether it's someone that they secretly love, that's always more interesting to me. It's like, you know, the one-sided unrequited love and then building towards it. So it was something like that too. It's like, oh, they could have asked them out, but then, oh, some new person is here, you know. That's big in rom-coms. That's big, like they did that Gilmore Girls, they would do that, you know, with Luke and Lorelai, stretched it out for 4 seasons before they finally got together. But in shows where like there's a main couple, you're waiting for them to get together, like take for example Ross and Rachel in Friends, where in season 1 it was Ross pining for Rachel, then she finds out about his feelings, and then in season 2 she starts pining for him, and then all of a sudden he's got a new girlfriend, Julie, so then Julie's there to kind of just keep them apart. Similarly with Jim and Pam on The Office, Jim pining for Pam this whole time in season 1 and 2, then he confesses his feelings to her, but she's engaged to Roy, saying no, I can't. I love that episode, Casino Night. And then she breaks it off with Roy. So now she's single, and now she's pining for Jim, but he's in Stamford. And then when he comes back, then he is with Karen. So then we have Karen, who's kind of just keeping them apart. And then still like then they finally get together in season 4. So just kind of those characters who are there to still like keep them apart. And it's like the cliffhanger. It's like, you know, kind of like that plays into the will they, won't they, or a matter of when will they, you know, so moments of kind of like, okay, let's finally see them get together, and then, you know, so that's what like makes it all the more satisfying when they eventually do get together. Number 6 is a sense of foreboding. Use foreshadowing and body language. Use signs and symbols. Let your characters know that they will be going off into a dangerous place or a risky situation. So again, where we as the audience see some form of danger that the character doesn't necessarily see yet. In classes I've been taking recently, one of the teachers had, and you may have even heard this example too. It's from, I can't think off the top of my head. I want to say Chekhov, but no, Chekhov is Chekhov's gun. But I think it's similar though, where the example is it's not interesting watching just two characters sitting in a cafe talking. Although you can make it interesting, I would argue that, but it's not, let's say, visually interesting. But if there is a bomb underneath the table that's about to go off or has an X amount of minutes before it goes off and the characters are talking, then that adds a extreme suspense, oh no, this bomb's gonna go off, they don't know about it. Then it's one of those cliffhangers, oh no, what's gonna happen? They're gonna find out, they're gonna die, what's gonna happen? So just this unknown danger to the characters, then that makes for an interesting scene. So just kind of ways that we as the audience can know, whereas the main character doesn't know yet. Even in in Disney movies too, when the villain is up to their big scheme and the protagonist doesn't know yet, so then they're gonna fall into their trap or whatever it may be. So things like that. Number 7 is a ticking clock. End with a sense of urgency. A deadline has to be met. If I don't get this done, then we're screwed, whatever. So ticking clock, ticking time bomb, as it were, anything like that. Number 8, an accident. This can be a physical accident or a slip of the tongue. Set off an alarm, reveal a secret, break a leg. So again, for me, I prefer the more emotional, that kind of stuff. But again, physicals, stuff in action movies, things like that, physical danger. That's that's why it's called a cliffhanger, a literal. That's where it started, a literal cliffhanger, the character hanging off the cliff, So, and they're gonna get saved or rescued, whatever it is. So. That's a literal example. Anyway, number 9, unexpected news. This includes any important information or even a person that shows up unexpectedly. End a scene with the protagonist receiving devastating news. That's the worst, though. It's something bad happens, but then that's a good cliffhanger, a good point to just kind of cut to something else or end the episode that way, end the season that way. But that's just devastating, though. But, the best cliffhangers, I think, just kind of toy with your emotions, but then, ultimately it leads to something good, something better for the protagonist. And number 10 is an unmade decision. A character has a decision that needs to be made. One great cliffhanger to me that comes to mind is, just to bring up Friends again, one of the best cliffhangers I think in that show was, I think it's season 4, the end of season 4, when Ross, take the Emily, take the Rachel. He says Rachel's name instead of Emily, his bride. So, it's one of the best. Oh my God. With that show, they were smart because they knew that everyone was wanted to see what would happen with Ross and Rachel. So with that show, every season ended on a cliffhanger revolving around Ross and Rachel to some degree, the whole will they, won't they with them. Well, one was with Monica and Chandler at their wedding, and then she's we have a baby, and then it turns out that Rachel's the one who's pregnant, so that was that one. Oh, and you know what? Another one that just came to mind to me, another great cliffhanger, was, I think it's season 1 of South Park, where they did a whole thing about who was Eric Cartman's dad, and then you had to wait a season to find out, and then they purposely did an April Fool's episode that was just Terrence and Phillip related. So then they just did an F you to the audience, no, you gotta wait even longer. So, and then you know what? We didn't actually find out the true identity of Cartman's father until episode 200, which is an absolutely amazing episode that was pulled off the air. But oh, man, that's a whole other thing. But I do remember that's just a fantastic cliffhanger. That, who's Cartman's real dad, and then it took that long. So any type of question you can ask. Big cliffhangers too are kind of the who done it, who did this. I know Simpsons, who shot Mr. Burns, I guess a parody of that, who shot that guy, so things like that, parody of the Dallas episode as mentioned. So that's the best kind of cliffhangers too, just kind of the question, and you speculate, oh, who is it, and so like I said though, the worst is a show getting canceled on a cliffhanger. But so again, in my mind, the best cliffhangers are the ones that despite all the speculation, it still just goes off in a different direction that is even better than what people speculated. Or if it was what people predicted, that it just kind of is still like enhanced all the more in a different way that is just still exciting and keeps the audience engaged and interested. And again, like being used in books too, and in with like small cliffhangers within TV shows. I know, like off the top of my head too, Bob's Burgers does a lot of little cliffhangers where just like a new thing shows up. So they do like those mysteries a lot, like who, like those kind of like mystery things within a lot of their episodes. So just like a new development comes about, and then commercial break. So that's like fun too, I think. Small cliffhangers and big cliffhangers too. So hopefully, if done right, they just like leave your audience wanting more and keep them guessing, and then just really make you excited to see what's going to happen next. And with that, that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. As always, you can follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Be sure to check out storytellingsaga.com, and feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week will be 30, Flirty, and Thriving when I discuss 13 going on 30. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.